Hello, I'm Chuck Black, and this is the Age of Ingenuity, our weekly chronicle of Canada's current innovation economy. We've got some good stories this week. There's still room for innovation, but the focus of our current pandemic response has changed. It's no longer fast, effective, and timely healthcare activities. It's now a little bit more of fearing overreaction and concerns over appropriate future planning. And we're going to take a look at that.
To me, I love the money. My name is Alan Collar. I want everyone to have enough money so that we all load it into our wheelbarrows and go to the grocery store for food, just like in Venezuela. If we don't rebuild our supply chain, inflation will turn Canadian dollar into pesos in the blink of an eye.
Hello, Chuck. Hello, Al. I'm Brian Orlotti, and I'm thinking that our current situation, essentially a low rules environment where solutions are more important than process, and government agencies find it exceptionally easy to cut through red tape to bypass normal checks and balances, might slowly be coming to an end as the pandemic winds down and the economy reopens. With that said and done, here are a few of the stories we're currently tracking. And our first piece comes from the Globe and Mail, titled, "What Will Canada's Pandexit Strategy Look Like? How Officials Are Deciding When to Lift Coronavirus Lockdowns," by Adam Radwanski and Ivan Semeniuk. The discussion about how to begin reopening Canadian society is ramping up, even as the country has yet to pass the peak of the pandemic that has shut it down. In provinces with relatively low COVID-19 rates, governments have started to publicly express optimism about lifting restrictions. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe has said he hopes to release a plan for doing so in the coming week. But based on interviews this week with a range of sources, including senior political officials in Ottawa and provincial capitals, and infectious disease and economic experts both here and abroad, Canadians should be braced for a potentially frustrating and anxiety-inducing second phase of the coronavirus response.
Yeah, that just makes me feel wonderful. That's not the only story we have on this topic as well, Brian. We also have something from the National Post.
We do. This piece from the National Post entitled, "Joe Oliver, a primal policy battle is coming and Canada's future is at stake." At this moment of national peril, those with an ideological agenda are plotting the permanent expansion of government at the expense of personal freedom and economic opportunity. Some are questioning the value of globalization. The usual suspects are advocating the demise of the energy industry. These dystopian ideas are likely to be the follow-up to the government's colossal stimulus and aid program. We are experiencing the mother of all crises because the combination of momentous events has no historical parallel. The global scope and impact of the pandemic, the shuttering of economies by government edict, an oil price collapse, and unprecedented fiscal and monetary intervention. Maybe that is why conventional wisdom's conclusion seems to be that everything will change forever. If we are not careful, that could become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Let's be fair; those are great words. But let's also be fair. Joe Oliver is he's a member of the Conservative Party. In 2014 and 2015, he was the finance minister. He would be the person responding to this pandemic if he was in office today. He's got an axe to grind.
Indeed, and just, more loosey-goosey, the sky is falling hyperbole, and another politician who's basically saying, don't write anyone a check except me.
I think that's fair. What do you think, Al?
I'll write the checks. Just ask me. I know what I'm doing. I'm the expert now. If I say it, it's true. What I think, though, money won't solve the problem, and it solved the solutions that the government has. For real.
How about I absolutely think that's true. People who watch this podcast will note that I get a lot of my background information for this from something called the National Angel Capital Organization. They're heavily focused on innovation. They have many members who are incubators and accelerators, and they've been putting on a really neat conference call every Thursday. And the first couple of conference calls were absolutely wonderful, full of very senior people who said things like, these are our problems. These are the solutions we need in order to move forward. But I noticed that the Thursday call, I think that was the, what was that, the 23rd of April? Anyways, the Thursday call, the focus seemed to have moved away from high level overviews and calls to action. And they moved towards a process, I would say. They focus now on process instead of the bigger issues. There was a lot of talk about creating more links and real-time synergy between small and medium-sized businesses as a way to move forward. And it sounded like a conference call in a medium-sized business organization. What do you guys think about that?
Sorry, I was actually on that conference call, and I was markedly unimpressed by that. There was no future plans there that were of any way innovative at all. It's rehashing of the same plans that are barely a plan in the first place, is what I thought. As outlined on the April 24th, 2020 Logic Post COVID-19 Roundup, Ottawa unveils its small business rent relief plan. About, quote, because almost everybody has a landlord, commercial landlords who agree to cut small business rent by 75% and not evict them will be able to get forgivable loans worth 50% of what they normally collect from the CMHC, being the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. The federal government announced Friday the cash flow to property owners, lenders, and provinces and territories will pick up the cost of the credit facility called the Canada Emergency Commercial Rental Assistance, or CECRA. Ontario Finance Minister Rod Phillips said the province has budgeted $241 million for the measure. Now, landlords can use this program for leases of less than $50,000 a month, held by firms that have lost at least 70% of the revenues to COVID-19.
And that makes a lot of sense. There is a story that came out on Friday that directly relates to this story from an innovation perspective.
And our next piece deals with the idea that perhaps it's already too late for certain portions of Canada's tech ecosystem, starting with noted tech incubator 111 in Toronto. A piece from BetaKit by Megan Simpson titled 111 announces it is permanently ceasing operations. Toronto-based incubator 111 announced on Wednesday that it has permanently ceased operations due to economic impacts caused by the current COVID-19 pandemic. In a letter to its community, the incubator noted that because of its model, 111 had absorbed some of the risks currently faced by the many startups that it houses in its downtown Toronto location. That model also involved 111 absorbing some of that risk, the risk of failure, the risk of graduations or closures or layoffs among our companies, and what that would mean to our bottom line in relation to the flexible short-term memberships we provide, the statement said.
If I can, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut in right now. I think 111 was a good organization and a wonderful place to hang, but 111, like most incubators and accelerators in Canada, it was primarily a real estate play, which it promoted itself as a great place to build connections to keep the rent high, but it made most of its money from rental units.
I agree. Like, why is this special at all? Like, what's going on here that's helping these people innovate? I just don't see it. It sounds like a landlord.
Well,
you go, Brian.
I was just going to say, I do agree that it's primarily a real estate play, although it has produced two big winners by Canadian standards. Zoom.ai, which is big in the AI space, and also Wealthsimple, which has grown to become a serious competitor to the big five Canadian banks, particularly in the realm of online automated investing. Full disclosure, I am a client of theirs, but I can attest they have a good product, and they've gotten huge investment from VCs, and I believe from some of the major banks as well. And our next piece comes from Columbia Reports, titled Columbia Able to Mass Produce Ventilators After Medellin Project Proves Successful, by Adrian Alcema. Factories in Colombia's second largest city, Medellin, are set to mass produce ventilators after local scientists and engineers were able to design and test the life-saving medical machines in a month. Because the developers used open source techniques, other factories are able to add production capacity if necessary.
This,
Until next,
I'm sorry. I was going to suggest that this is a reminder that we don't necessarily have to throw money at a problem in order to make it go away. I find this article in high contrast to some of the other articles that we've been researching over the last little while.
I agree totally, and I think the open source approach is very well suited to a situation like COVID-19, because you combine rapid development, rapid prototyping, many iterations quickly, and at very low cost. And with the open source licensing philosophy, you avoid patent lawsuits, you avoid intellectual property wrangling, and you can get the most bang for little buck.
I would agree with it does have a lot of merit though, but it's not going to build an economy so much. So it's not, I agree with that it works, but who is going to make the money off of this though? Like, how is anyone going to make money enough to provide more funding for research if it's so cheap and open source?
I'm not advocating it as a blanket approach, but
In this case.
yeah,
I would suggest that as a guy who covered the space industry and the aerospace industry for 10 years, I can't help noticing that Elon Musk has no patents at SpaceX.
that's a very good point, and indeed, well, not in the aerospace realm, but in the automobile world, he retroactively made all the patents on Tesla battery and electric motor and drivetrain technology effectively open source. And next up is a piece from Ars Technica. The pandemic is bringing us closer to our robot takeout future, by Timothy B. Lee. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, small sidewalk robots like this seemed to be slowly gaining traction here and at large. With lower costs and no need to tip, robots could make takeout more popular than ever as it gradually displaces human-driven food deliveries.
May I cut in at this moment and suggest that this is a conscious choice, that we could go down this path or not. I would also suggest that robots require substantial infrastructure to deploy and maintain, and that's a function of a centralized authority. I would also suggest that, at the very least, the French don't want to go down this path. Their perception is that this sort of delivery service, these sorts of robots, will mostly destroy small local stores. And they say that as per the April 25th, 2020, The Verge post, Amazon restricted from selling non-essential items in France after it loses court appeal. They are not allowed to sell a whole whack of things in France anymore and delivered by robots. The French government has made a conscious decision to make sure that local stores can still put their bread out every morning.
Actually, I have one question here. Why are there going to be police guarding these things? Because if it smells good, I got to go and kick it over and take the wings. Like, seriously.
That's another very good point, because we already have fucking assholes who are willing to steal Amazon packages from people's porches.
Exactly. That's the problem, is that that's the new, it's how it is now. If everything we have is delivered, this is what we get.
And those are the stories we're covering this week. As always, the articles we've referenced are listed in the show notes below. Keep in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Minds, and Gab.
If you'd like to promote your event or your activity, or if you think you have insight into Canada's current innovation economy, please send me an email. I'm at chuck.black@protonmail.com.
And we're currently on YouTube, BitChute, Vimeo, and hope to be on others soon. If you want to support our program, we're on Patreon. And if you want to sponsor us, send an email to Chuck, as he had mentioned prior.
And that's all for this week. We'll be back next week with more stories covering our current age of ingenuity.